Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Good Deeds Note Investing podcast. I am your host, Chris Seveney, along with Jamie Bateman, where we discuss the latest and greatest in the note investing industry. Jamie, happy Friday to you. How are you on this fine day?
I'm doing just fine, sir. You sound very serious and professional.
Just being myself, buddy. Just trying to be myself.
Okay.
So today we've got a jam-packed episode where we are going to go back in time a little bit and rehash some recent case studies and some stories that we've had going on. If anyone's part of our Facebook group, we share a lot of those exciting wins and losses in the Facebook group. Today, we're going to talk about those on the podcast. And it's really going to pretty much be a what just happened episode, where I know Jamie's had some recent activity with some foreclosures, bankruptcies, and interesting things happening. And I've just yesterday had two things happen that were pretty interesting, to say the least. One good, one not so good, which we will share on today's episode. So, Jamie, how are you doing other than that?
Good.
You ready to?
I'm ready to rock. I told you I was trying to force myself to get fired up today, but once I talk to you for an hour, that'll be good. It's better than 2 cups of coffee.
So I'm halfway through my first cup and listened to a little Pandora this morning. Some GNR came on, little Paradise City. So if that can't get your blood flowing a little bit, I don't know what can. So
yeah, I agree. But yeah, I feel like we haven't talked about our what just happened. We haven't really talked about our goings on with our assets recently too much. So this will be good. Yeah, I've definitely had some. I figure I can talk about one and you can ask questions and then we can switch. So
which one are you going to talk about? That's the interesting thing. Are you going to go with the mattress pad facility? You're going to go with your North Carolina
it's really
borrower?
funny that
you're going Texas foreclosure. You got plenty of options. It's like you're pulling a pinch hitter off the bench, and you got so many that you can bring up to the plate.
My probably 2 craziest assets, which basically means my craziest borrowers,
or assets you bought from me.
Or assets I bought from you, and they're exiting right around the same time. So we can hopefully, it's looking good. We'll pick the North Carolina one, since I know I've brought that up several times on this show. At least first, we'll talk about that one. So yeah, this is a North Carolina CFD, and it's a joint venture deal. I still have a few JV deals going on, trying to wrap those up. This has been going on for 2.5 years plus. And I did buy it from you, Chris. Lots of ups and downs and crazy voicemails over the years. Different things, tried to work with this borrower, especially when the pandemic hit. And she just was honestly not reasonable. And I don't know. I have some other things I could say, but she was renting out the property, and then the tenant who was in the property saw our newspaper ad that we were foreclosing. And then he realized, what the heck, I'm paying her rent, and this property is going to be gone soon. So he had contacted us and tried to buy the property. That didn't work. And so basically now we have it listed. Well, we're under contract to sell it for considerably more than I was expecting. We listed it for $35,000, $36,000. We had 3 offers within the first 3 days, just under the list price, and then one came in at $49,000. So to close within about 3 weeks. So it's looking good. We'll see though that the title search is going to cost me $3,000, which is insane. Yes, because they're claiming that there are so many different transactions in the history and everything. So still want to actually see this happen. There's no money in my bank account yet, put it that way, but it's looking better than it was looking 2-3 weeks ago.
Do you mind if I ask a few questions?
Go for it. Oh, and I should say, she came in, stole all the appliances, threatened to rip off the front porch. This is where it gets, the crazy stuff that people like. I wasn't sure if this bar was going to drive up, to my house. And I mean, there were all kinds of threats over the years. And, I was a little bit worried for the safety of our attorney and now the real estate agent and his team and everything. So haven't heard from her since her initial interaction with the agent a few weeks ago. So it seems to have died down. I guess she's happy that she was collecting rent and not paying her on her contract. So questions.
You mentioned it's been 2.5 years since you bought this. Was it a performing or non-performing asset when you bought it from me?
It was definitely more performing.
Okay.
And
we could not recall.
We paid $16,500, which was it was a good price at the time. She was paying. Yep.
Reason I asked that question is 2.5 years. Again, a lot of people talk about 12 to 18 month exit strategy. It's very easy for loans to go much longer than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I will say just on that real quickly, the pandemic, and then, the fact that we had to go through a judicial process. Well, didn't end up going through the courts, but North Carolina is tricky. So
it's an interesting state from what I've had interest. When I've
it wasn't a quick forfeiture,
Mm-hmm.
put it that way.
You mentioned voicemails the borrower's making. Were they calling the attorney? Were they calling you? Were they calling the servicer? Who were these voicemails directed to?
Mostly the attorney. And he would share them with me. I'm trying to remember. She may have left a voicemail on our business line as well. But they were mostly directed. There were definitely some things directed at me personally, but no, I mean, the attorney at one point met her in person, because that was the thing. She was refusing to accept, things, paperwork. And so that was delaying things. But there was one point where I was worried for my attorney's safety, to be honest with you. But several, and then one voicemail was from her tenant as well, at least one, where he said he felt uncomfortable and basically worried for his life when he was moving out, because my borrower had a group of people that was ready to jump him. So pretty not sure every day. Yeah, pretty intense. Exactly.
One thing that popped in my head when you mentioned the title was going to cost $3,000. I recall this property, the borrower would argue about the number of parcels, because in the legal description, it says like parcel 15, 16, 17, which, is basically, it's still one lot when you look at GIS. So she was complaining that somebody took property or land from her at a point in time and was trying to, use that. And that's where I thought you were going to go with the title.
No, that could still rear its ugly head as well. But, and she was, I don't think at the end of the day, she understood what a land contract is, and so she saw that, Labrador Lending or whoever bought this from your entity, and she thought that meant that the property was sold out from under her. And so we tried to explain this, but didn't go very far.
Have you had conversations with other title companies just to see why it's $3,000 out of curiosity?
No, good question. I'm using an REO company that I didn't have a particular title company in North Carolina to use. And my REO company did. And then, so this just came up yesterday afternoon, as far as the $3,000. Short answer is no. They're saying if there was a title policy in place at any point, then it would be significantly reduced in cost. I sent them the recent title search from my attorney's firm, which was 5 or 6 months ago. But they're saying that it doesn't matter. It was done by a title search company versus an attorney's firm. So I still find it absolutely outrageous. $3,000.
Reach out to Christina.
Okay.
Because she uses a attorney who does all the title and everything. I can't think of the name of them right now.
Gotcha.
But I would reach out reach out to her and say, hey, this seems a little off, and she'll be more than happy to help you. I know she was looking at possibly even acquiring that property, but
she
got connections.
She actually placed one of the bids.
Okay.
she put an offer on it.
Okay.
So that's good. Yeah. I mean, not that I want to pay that, but I'd be so happy if we can just make a profit and be done with this.
Yep.
So,
but that would be good education experience for people to understand in North Carolina, just to understand, because I was having a conversation with our membership group the other night, and we were talking about calculators, and, you can have the greatest calculator on the planet, but if the numbers you input on it aren't accurate, then your calculator is basically worthless from that perspective.
And the other thing to point out too, when you're looking at a deal, one other thing is, like this did have a co-borrower on it, and he was long gone, in and out of prison, and so that can slow things down as well if you have to go through foreclosure. So just take a look at that, and how if this was a land contract, but if they held title to the property, how was that title held? I've had other deals where it's actually, tenants in common, and the one borrower is long gone, and that can present issues as well. So just something to consider. You may look at it, oh, there's two borrowers, so there's a higher chance of that they're going to pay this loan back. There's two, potential sources of income. Well, it could go the other way too if you have to go down the foreclosure route.
I want to go back one time to the 2.5 years. When did you start the legal on this? And just curious from a time frame, how long the entire process took.
Definitely.
And did you try and do a modification at any point in time during that process?
I was trying to modify it in 2020, and she was on board supposedly, and but it just kept getting delayed and everything. So I would say late 2020. So probably a little under 2 years is actually when we started legal.
Okay.
So it took a good bit of time. But yeah, so that's that. I mean, there are a lot of other things we glossed right over, obviously over 2.5+ years. But ultimately I do think it's going to be profitable. So my main thing is to make sure I make my JV partner whole, and then we can, move on. So how about something you have going on?
So I'll mention it. My last question I was going to ask is, what's your biggest lesson learned from that asset?
Probably, well, I'd say evaluating the borrower more than I did that, 2.5 years ago. I know people like to say in first, you don't really pay attention to the borrower. But I'd say that's probably at least one key takeaway. It made sense on paper, but when you look back at kind of the underwriting of the initial deal, I think paying attention to the borrower's income and their, situation would have been smarter.
Yeah. So let's see. I'm trying to think which story I want to start with. I'll start with one thing I'll mention to everyone, which I'm going to be doing over the next few weeks, is going through my attorney list and reevaluating all my attorneys and actually set up phone calls with them. Because what I've noticed pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, there has been a lot of turnover and there's been a lot of changes within the space. And rightfully so, because attorneys, especially on the collection side, pretty much were shut down for a year and a half in judicial states. But I've had attorneys who were excellent pre-pandemic, and post-pandemic, it's been very challenging. So I'm in the process of reviewing and analyzing, everyone I work with, and kind of, which I think is a good process as part of any business. The reason I mention this is,
but if someone has a list of attorneys, that's all they need, right? Like, go ahead.
You stumped me, Jamie. This business is about building relationships, is what it's about.
Okay.
So.
And I'm sorry, the reason you mentioned the attorney thing?
My coffee's empty. I'm wondering if I should like ask my wife, you want to bring me down a cup of coffee, which I get
See how
slugged
that
across the
goes.
head. Yeah, let's see how that goes. Yeah, right. uh, I've had a case in Arizona that the borrower did a strategic foreclosure. It was vacant land, and it was part of a pool we bought. We foreclosed on the land, decent size. I think it's 10 or 20 acres, so decent sized land. Value 50 grand, maybe 50, 75,000. And the borrower during it was little challenging. So we also filed a deficiency judgment against them. And we reached a settlement with them in February.
Okay.
And when I, reach agreements, I'm always of the opinion, pigs get fat and happy, hogs get slaughtered type thing.
Mm-hmm. Don't be too greedy, right?
Yeah, don't be too greedy. So we reached an agreement in February, executed the agreement, I think in like early March, and then everything just goes silent. When I say silent, even my attorney, I've been calling, emailing the attorney every week, what's going on, no response. I had sent the wire instructions, money never came. And then at about 8:00 last night, our time, I get an email from the attorney. Hey, I want to discuss this case with you. Do you have a moment to talk? And I'm like sitting there, basically putting kid to bed and stuff. I'm like, yep, I do, because I finally got their attention.
Right.
And he calls me and essentially is, hey, is this deal still valid? Because I know you mentioned in an email, which first he's like, oh, I haven't gotten your emails. But then he goes, in your email, you mentioned because they haven't settled this, let's just keep going.
The email
with
you
it.
didn't get, right?
Yeah, the email you didn't get. So that's kind of one story of, hopefully, knock on wood, we get that resolved and be a win-win, I think, for everybody in that instance. On the exact opposite end of things, I have a foreclosure case, and this isn't the attorney's fault, that took a very long time. And there's a surplus on the funds, which the courts honestly don't usually have surplus funds on foreclosures, so they almost don't know how to treat it.
So can you just give us some numbers, whether they're real or not, but just what does that mean?
Total payoff, 170,000, property sells for 200,000 at foreclosure.
Got it.
UPB was only 50,000.
Wow.
So there's 110,000 in arrears. Been going on for about 12 years.
That's a lot.
3 bankruptcies in the mix during this time. But when you think about a loan at 9% at 50,000, that's 4,500 a year times like 9 years, that's 36,000. Property taxes of $4,000 a year times 9 years, there's another 36. There's 72,000. Legal fees every time the FPI. So it's valid. But these costs spanned over 11 years, and the borrower was making payments during the bankruptcy and this and that. So some of that money gets applied to some of those past arrears. So when we provide the accounting, and it's been through 3 different servicers and the loan's been sold 4 different times, we provide everything, and the court can't figure out what is and what isn't owed. So they start asking questions. Well, show me they paid this. Show me this was paid.
The previous, like 3 investors ago or
3 investors ago, yes,
paid this FBI bill or whatever
with servicers. And
right.
So they come back and their accounting shows that we're only owed 150,000, not 170,000.
Okay. This is the court's accounting, right?
This is the court's accounting.
Okay.
Which I've already gotten the majority of the money. It's actually
right.
So now all of a sudden, I think there's like 10,000 being held, because at the time, the way things were filed, that's, basically there's the foreclosure happened a long time ago, and the courts took a year to settle it. So they give you the money up to like the foreclosure date, and then the money that was in between, which was like 6,000 in taxes and everything, they were essentially holding that money. So now all of a sudden I'm looking at, them wanting me to cut them a check for $20,000 back to them.
What? Wow.
Yeah.
So, okay. I didn't
So-
realize we were headed there.
Oh
Jeez.
yeah. Yes. So my attorney calls me yesterday morning and he's like, yeah, it's going to be a very uncomfortable phone call we're going to have. And I actually thought it was about another asset.
Oh,
Yeah. And actually, I thought it was actually going to be a bigger deal. So on something else. And all of a sudden, I'm like, uh-oh. I'm like, oh, XYZ asset. He's like, no, ABC asset. I'm like, because we've been going back and forth because the courts had asked for some information and I provided it and give him some things. And he's like, yeah, they've reconciled their accounting and they came up with their number. And I'm thinking, okay, if it's $3-5 grand, that's, by the way, this note is a grand slam. So
no matter how it goes,
made 6 figures on the deal. So over 3 years, 3, 4, probably, actually, no, it's probably 4 years, but made 6 figures. So
how much money did you have into it approximately?
50 to 60.
Wow. That's grand slam for sure.
So so at 170, it's $100,000 profit.
But still, you don't want to cut them a $20,000 check.
Yeah, nobody ever wants to
Right.
cut, especially after you already got it.
Right.
If you would just cut me a lesser check, it's much different going back to the well. Where was I going with that?
This is going to be a difficult conversation.
Oh yeah. So the attorney's like, yeah, it's going to be a difficult conversation. I'm driving in the way to work and I'm literally sitting in traffic because I can see a car. Well, I'm driving into work. 3 fire trucks and 2 ambulances go flying by me, which is always a sign when you're sitting in traffic. The fudge moment of
you're gonna be sitting there for a while.
I'm gonna be sitting there for a while. Thankfully, the accident was only like a mile ahead, so I only sat for like 25 minutes during this call. Which there was a car somehow got flipped over. I have no idea how cars get flipped over, but that's another story. So difficult conversation, and like I thought it was going somewhere another direction. And then he starts bringing this one up. And I was on the call, I didn't yell, I didn't scream. I was like, okay. My question is, can we set up another call? Can we get an understanding for their numbers? Can we maybe reevaluate? Is there something I can do? Trying to find a solution to the problem. And this is one of the things I believe I do a very good job at, is I'm always a forward thinker, not a backwards thinker, where a lot of times people get caught up or hung up on an issue that comes up and they try and reinvent like what happened, why did it happen. It's important sometimes to know that, to learn, but in certain instances, okay, I understand the story. Me getting upset about it is not going to change anything. Me thinking quickly, how can I rectify this or minimize damage is what's very important. So he had a call last night or yesterday afternoon, and we think we can, knock on wood, get that number down substantially based off of some of the feedback that was provided. I share this story because there's tapes coming out left and right now that, the column for total payoff is in like big bold letters and they're like, oh, bid off total payoff. And with a lot of equity now in these properties, it makes sense that the courts are really going to start looking at how much money is going back to these borrowers and is everything accounted for, and can you provide proof? When this happened in the past, when people requested I bid off assets like this, I've asked, will you guarantee the total payoff? And do you have copies of all the receipts? And both answers are no. My next comment is, then why should I bid off of it? That's your accounting record, but a court or somebody else may not agree with it. The UPB is something that's very simple to prove.
Yeah, right.
That's easy to prove.
To validate or justify.
The total payoff. Yeah, hey, a servicer screwed up, add an extra 0 to a number, and there's no invoice.
It gets quickly into a he said, she said scenario.
And I'm really starting to see that a lot more. And I put this in the Facebook group, and several other people have mentioned, hey, I've had the same issue. So kind of a, I don't want to use a warning, but pay attention.
And I feel like this is totally anecdotal. Like I don't have evidence to back it up, but it seems like the servicers that I use have been a little more wanting proof of certain things. Just recently, I don't know, in the last 6 months, I'll say. So it seems like servicers are getting are on the same page with what you're saying right now.
Yeah.
They're not just going to willingly, add a charge to an account without some kind of proof that you actually paid for it.
Yep.
So yeah, that's okay. That's good to know. I mean, I guess, so I'll flip it around on you then. What's the takeaway? I know you already said about bidding, but what could you have done differently in this scenario?
I'm paying a lot more attention to the collateral when it comes in the door. And not only just the assignments, the mortgages, and that component, but what do they have? What's the data that they've got coming over in the file? Do they have the complete pay history? Do they have copies of the tax bills? What is it that they have? And most servicers actually, or most lenders and servicers, have a lot of that information. But when they transfer it over, they just provide the data tape and the collateral. They don't provide all that other information.
Right.
Certain ones like Rob Hitha, who's from US, who sells USMR product, they're actually really good with what they provide because that's PNC paper. So that's one thing that I've noticed. And he sells first and seconds. Check title. I've noticed I bought stuff from him, and there's been some issues with the legal descriptions, which you can fix them and so forth. And that's not by any means just a knock against Rob. I actually really enjoy buying from him, and his process is smooth. And like I said, the paper is actually, or the file itself is in good shape. Compared to some of these other hedge funds where, you and I have bought from, and literally it's one file that you can't even, it's upside down trying to figure out what's actually in there.
And another thing is when you're buying, before you've actually wired the money, obviously the seller is a little more motivated to make the deal happen. Once they get the money, it's a little late. So in other words, I remember Matt Kelly making a comment at DME that, as far as pay history, from years prior or whatever, he said, oh no, it exists. You just don't have it. And so the point being, at that point is when you're about to close on a deal, if you're a buyer, that's when your seller is still motivated to help you, get that information. And so it likely does exist. It's just once you close on the deal, it's going to be a lot harder to get cooperation from the seller or anyone prior to that seller as far as the pay history or whatever you're talking about. So yeah, it's there. It's just, can you actually obtain it in a reasonable amount of time?
Can I tell one more story of something that just popped in my head?
Go for it.
I think I mentioned this on a prior podcast. I've had numerous BK filings over the past few weeks.
Yeah, you did.
And a majority of them are, and these are all first position, and a majority of them are trying to do cram downs.
Really?
And a few of them are on manufactured homes, but the homes are secured. They're, on foundations. Even the ones that aren't. And I've one right now, and this week I've been busy that I haven't gotten to all my email, but one is single family residence that they're trying to cram down. And the attorney's asking me like, oh yeah, you need a BPO to confirm value. I'm like, why do I need a BPO to confirm value if I'm in first? So just, again, there's a lot of, as we come through this pandemic, seems like there's some shifts in things that we're seeing. And if you saw it once, it's like, oh, okay, that's an oddity. But I'm seeing a lot of similar things happening.
Right.
And I'm wondering if they're trying to make the shift, which it would be horrible in the minds from lending standards if they allow you to cram down a first, because no bank is going to give anybody a mortgage knowing that if housing downturns, they can file bankruptcy to reduce their principal balance. I mean, no lender in their right mind on a first position would do that. I mean, you go to buy a house today, and if it loses value in a year, you're going to be like, oh, I'm just going to drop my principal balance by filing bank. I mean, that would be, I mean, people would think, oh, that's a really good idea that you could do that. I'm like, yeah, good luck trying to get a loan or how much you'd have to put down payment on your house.
Yeah. When you were talking, it's the takeaway for me there is, and speaking to myself just as much as anyone else, but if as a note investor, it's important to be plugged in to, like your membership group, for example, but just plugged into, because if you're out on an island, just doing notes from your house, you may not be aware of these types of shifts. And it's just, not that Chris has all the information or I have all the information, but it's important to talk to people, talk to attorneys. Different states are going to be changing in different ways. So it's, you can't just read an article about, potential shifts in bankruptcy or something, or whatever. It's important to be networking and talking to other note investors. So,
and actually, that makes a great point. Of when I talk to my attorneys over the next few weeks, that's one of the questions to ask is what are the shifts that you're seeing?
yeah.
Right now, everything on news is focused on interest rates, inflation, the stock market, and whatever else. It's not really much about some of these minor things or changes that you're seeing at a microcosmic level. So it's something that pay attention to.
So I was thinking of going with the mattress vomiting RV situation. I can briefly touch on that. We are the estimate. So ended up having to do an eviction. Unfortunately, this was a CFD in Michigan. I had a hearing in mid-December, Zoom hearing with the co-borrower who was no longer in the picture, but he showed up for the hearing, and my attorney and the judge. And so we got the forfeiture, we got the land contract canceled at that point, but there's a 90-day redemption period. So for 90 days, we're just waiting. And so eventually we had to do an eviction, and it's really, really sad, the situation. It's one of those where I'm actually happy we did the eviction, because the borrower had kids living in a really, really bad environment, and Child Protective Services had to come in on the day of the eviction. And I don't know what the latest is with that, but the estimate I got on the clean out, the trash out so far is $9,200, but it's taking a lot longer than they expected for a lot of different reasons. So I still think this will be profitable, believe it or not. But we'll see where it goes. I mean, the expenses are adding up quickly. So, that one has also had a ton of ups and downs over the years. And we did a modification, but then she never paid anything, after that. So that one we're also exiting. I'm happy to put in the rearview mirror here shortly. But the one I wanted to mention was that when I first kind of got into notes, which was it's right around when you and I did the Nightmare on Elm Street JV deal. It was like the same week I also closed on a deal in Jackson, Mississippi, which so I think, long story, and again, I've learned a lot in the last, 4+ years. So, but I think what I'd heard was 85% of investors who went in on this not one deal, but worked with this group of people in Jackson, 85% of them lost, all of their money or close to all of it. I was one of the lucky ones who didn't. But what we ended up doing, and I mentioned this on previous episodes, it was a 5-year interest only loan on a rental property where there's a balloon after 5 years. And the borrower kept asking me to amortize it. And for a while I said no, but we eventually did. Right. And so he's been making payments pretty much on time the whole time. Well, he just did a refi and I just got the payoff. So it's not like a huge win where, it's not something like I paid $5,000 and I got a $45,000 check or something, but I collected all that money over 4 years, and then just got a payoff. And I'd previously, when he did the amortization, he put down $5,000 to make that happen. So point being, it is a profitable deal and it could have gone much worse. But the takeaway, and this is going to sound like I'm tooting my own horn, but I was very active in this situation and said, okay, what's the best scenario here? As opposed to just sitting back and letting things happen to me. It was like, okay, what should we do here? And so we redid the loan in 2020 and it's turning out well. So yeah, I'm happy to get an infusion of cash and have, again, I'm focused more on the fund model. So these are deals that I'm wrapping up and kind of, putting in the rearview mirror. So yeah, that one turned out well.
I think you're underselling that one a little. Let me tell people a little bit more of the story. A company down in Jackson, Mississippi was, correct me if I'm wrong, essentially buying REOs, saying they're going to fix them up, get renters in there and sell them off to you, or sell them to them and you're the lender.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was also a broker who brought those two parties together.
So
yes.
similar to, almost similar to what was happening with like the Fox and Friends guy in Indiana or whatever. And we're not going to name his name and so forth.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of these houses they were saying were getting renovated and so forth were not. Correct.
Absolutely. Yep.
And this wasn't just one or two people. There's, tens or not hundreds, but probably like 25, 50 people caught in this mess.
I'd say probably 50. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like you mentioned, majority of them were more passive, thinking they're going to be passive, investing. Right. Oh, this will be a performing loan. What you have is that experience, though, when this happened, to understand two things. One is work towards a solution, but know where to go if you didn't. And you also offered to help a lot of people that were going through this, and some of them didn't want the help, correct?
Yeah, well, it just, at some point, I did have a bunch of phone calls with people who, were caught up in this situation. And some of these, there just wasn't a lot you could do because the property value was gone. There was nothing there, or they'd already signed over the property to this other company. It's like, what are you doing? Like, why didn't you call an attorney? And, so yeah, I did spend literally hours with people trying to help them out. I don't know if it was fruitful, but yeah. And this was something where somebody on Bigger Pockets was kind of directing people. I don't think he meant anything by it. I don't think it was like he's a bad person or anything.
It's a big name too, I believe.
Yeah, on our Bigger Pockets tax lien and notes forum. But and so a lot of people just trusted, okay, he knows what he's talking about, and myself included. And again, I don't think it was malicious on this guy's, from his standpoint, but just doing your due diligence on who you're working with. I guess that's the other takeaway for me.
That, and if you think things don't look right, take action.
Yeah.
There was somebody in our group who was trying to reach another note investor, haven't been able to. They've kind of gone dark on them. They put it in the Facebook group, and this is second, third, fourth time this has happened. Yeah. And the person reached out to me. I gave them I put them in touch with an attorney, and the attorney replied back, "Oh, we know this person very well. We've assisted other people in regards to, these issues." And a lot of people are hesitant to spend money to file a lawsuit or file something, but send that initial demand. It's just like one of your borrowers, basically they owe you money, not paying you. Send that demand or, that contract, and it's not big money to do that. But if you don't, they're just going to continue to ignore you. They've got no incentive to reach back out to you. It's similar to a borrower that if you're not calling them or chasing them for money and they're living in the property or they're collecting the money, in this instance, the person potentially may be collecting money or they may not, basically do something or find an investor to look into it, because they had me look into it. And it looks like the properties that this person was participating in were sold last year. There's CFDs that they already liquidated.
So this investor had already apparently liquidated there's nothing, there are no assets still there.
There's no assets still there.
But the
potentially that's
but the JV partner never
received a penny.
And never got a penny. Wow. Wow. That's crazy.
It's very unfortunate, honestly. And that people do things like that. And sometimes people, I don't even want to speculate.
Yeah, no. And I actually have bought one asset from the person we're talking about. And it was really messy. We had to re-record everything because you know, I don't know. I won't go into it, but
Well, I found out yesterday, or you found out as well, because I sent you the email, a large fund that we used to buy from filed
yeah,
bankruptcy.
yeah, yes,
So, and again, bankruptcies are public record. But Home Opportunity,
I was
which
gonna
back
say.
in the day, we all bought CFDs from, Jamie and I were helping somebody who bought an asset from us try and get a document re-signed.
Yeah,
And I reached out to people I know there, and all of a sudden they come back and say, well, you're going to have to ask the trustee. We can't sign it because we filed bankruptcy. And I was like, whoa, okay.
yeah.
So,
So he's still gonna go to the trustee and probably get it taken care of. But but yeah, that was surprising for sure.
yeah.
But yeah, it's public information. Do you have any other what just happened stories?
Oh,
Have you been so I don't want to get off into like what we have going on with our businesses too much, but you haven't been buying a whole lot other than we're bidding on some assets for our integrity fund, but have you been not buying as much this year so far?
no, this year, the first quarter, and this is typical, first quarter, try and get, taxes, books, all that fun stuff done, which everybody is struggling with at this point in time. We don't need to go down, beat the dead horse on that. Also, from a business perspective, we are planning the next 6 months of what we're doing. So we're, looking to scale. So I've got new people starting, bringing new people on board. So I had somebody start this week who's going to help me with my existing portfolio. I got somebody starting next week who's going to be working on our next venture that we've got going on. So, a lot of training and bringing people up to speed on that. I've, for the most part, haven't done a lot of buying. I'd say a little bit here and there, but also the price of the values of assets I've bought have increased. So I may have closed out some notes that I bought for like 20, 30, 40 grand and say I get 2 of them at 40 grand back. That's 80. I'll turn around and buy one asset for, 75 grand or whatever the case may be. We do have 2 funds that are closing later on this year. So we'll actually be, liquidating some assets as well. But are you seeing more product? Do you feel there's more product coming down the pipeline?
Seems like it does seem like there's been an uptick in the last, I'll say, month. Today is May 6th. It just feels like I've seen more product, just tapes coming across. But the pricing is just crazy still. I mean, and again, somebody who's been in the space for 15 years would definitely agree with that. But and I don't know, is that just the new normal? Now, I mean, we did an analysis on the NPLs that we've bought in our fund, and largely because you got some really good deals. We closed at 53% of UPB overall in our fund. These are for just the NPLs, not counting, not the whole portfolio. But I'm not getting anywhere. I'm not seeing any pricing anywhere near that now. So it's just hard to, pull the trigger. We did bid on a couple of these HUD HECM loans that are, people can look that up. It's the reverse mortgages where the borrowers are deceased, and it's likely there's only one exit strategy, and that's, foreclose. And because they're non-recourse loans, you're not going to be, there's no, I guess you do have to deal with probate potentially, but there's not going to be a bankruptcy filed or anything like that. So it's fairly straightforward play from an exit standpoint, but it's just, you got to get your property value right. That's the thing. It's if you get that wrong, you're gonna lose money. So we are bidding on those, but yeah, go ahead.
That's very important, because some of them has a $200,000 value. Some of them want like 175,000, and it makes 0 sense at basically 80, 90, almost 90 cents on the dollar. Where if you get it, your foreclosure and then liquidation costs are going to be, you're going to spend, say, assume 10 grand to foreclose, and then 10% liquidation, you're 30 something thousand, you're already underwater. So
even if you make like, let's say just 5 grand, was that worth it?
Not for the risk.
the risk and your time and the work involved. And yeah, so we've been very, I'd say, careful as far as, frankly, we're sitting on a little too much cash from an ideal standpoint, but it's still better than losing money. So yeah.
I'm thinking to work with Elon on his Neuralink and basically be able to like link to people's brains to kind of understand risk involved with pricing of assets. To, if it's $5,000, but what's your risk involved, to kind of, and make it a calculator that's automatically in your head that not only analyzes the amount you're going to make, but the risk involved with it as well. So
yeah, because people get so hung up on the upside, but then
so
undervalue the risk.
Yeah, that's my next venture. So I'm going to start
you and Elon
literally picking people's brains. So
yeah, we'll see I'm curious to see where Twitter goes. Anything else any other highlights or recent interesting things that have happened?
I've got two loans. Here's some interesting ones. So here's the creative juices flowing. People watching this, I'm starting to do all my hand movements. I have two borrowers who I have multiple loans with both borrowers. One of them is a first and second on a single property, and one of them is two firsts on two different properties. And we're working on forbearances for both. And the loans are lines of credit. And I don't know why, but some servicers just struggle with lines of credit and don't understand that once the line is closed, it has an amortization schedule and kind of goes down that path. But I'm not going to go down that. That's a whole vent session for another month that we could talk about. So what we did on both loans is we did modifications where we essentially combined the loans. Where on the one that's two separate properties, I actually had it in two different entities. I had to sell it to the other entity. And that one's a little more difficult based on how we're working that. It's really going to end up being still two separate loans, but the mods kind of, and the attorney's finalizing that arrangement. But we didn't want to combine the loans to do a new loan because there's other liens on the properties that we want to use, have our position superseded. But on the other one, it was much cleaner where it's first and second. We basically just modified the loan, said, okay, your payment's going to be $400 a month and $200 of each payment is going to be applied to loan A, 200 to loan B.
Interesting.
So
yeah, haven't done that before.
So, and when you think about it, you're, so in that case, the other one's a little more complex on how that one's going to work, and we're still working out details. But on this one where it's first and second, it's one mod. So, some people will charge you for two mods instead of modifying both loans, wrap them in one, reference both of them in the same package, and you're essentially, saving some money.
And you're not raising, you're not getting into ability to repay issues or anything there, right?
Nope. So
yeah, think outside the box. You don't have to treat it as first and second still. Take a step back and look at the whole picture. That's good. Yeah, we could do a whole episode on, on modifications and, I actually curious, like how people treat, you said forbearance. Do you always do a forbearance or trial payment plan before you do a modification?
Yes.
Okay. And is that a formal thing? Like, you have an agreement. It's not just like, hey, an email. Is it always a formal agreement?
Yes. And let me tell you why. Oh, you had to bring this up.
Okay.
I have a loan that a prior entity and prior servicer wrote. It wasn't a modification. I forgot what they called it, but essentially it was an agreement that they reduced the UPB from 25,000 down to 13,000 at 0% interest. And if the borrower defaulted, it would kick back. The borrower, it was never signed though by the servicer who was the signing authority. But they, in the system, basically acknowledge it, and they changed all the data. What a servicer, my understanding, should do is when they put this in the system, there's a way they can basically put in like a forbearance, but still track if it fails the old numbers, because if somebody's in a forbearance where the payment goes to 300 from 600 at 9% interest, the forbearance is basically during it. So the payment plan is, hey, your payment's this much, but if you fail, it goes back to the old.
Mm-hmm.
The servicer was not set up or could not transfer it back to the old.
Hmm.
And they're like, we can't do that. Okay. So,
Again,
this
another
why,
episode.
why you probably should use licensed servicers. So essentially, they also, when we went to go back and change, the borrower defaulted, and we went to go back and change it, we notified the servicer to send them the information. They never did. And then the borrower ended up reinstating, making 10 payments. And the issue was they made a comment, well, I never got my payment coupon book was sent to me, and I never got monthly statements. So I never got anything. So that's why they didn't know where to pay. So now I'm caught in this conundrum of what do you do? And we allowed them to go back to this agreement. And then the servicer sends this long-winded email, basically blaming me as the lender, and they did nothing wrong. Of course, I forwarded it to my attorney, and they're just CYA because they were also, when they changed the amount, they didn't put it as 0% interest. They kept it at the 9%. So the borrower, when they made the payments, was applying also some of it to interest. Then it got transferred. The borrower's gets their statement and is arguing about it, and rightfully so, because the interest should have been moved to principal, but also there are some charges that were old that were supposed to be wiped out as well. Lo and behold, this ended up, I could have fought it, or I could have gone after the servicer. It's about $2,800 is what it essentially cost me. But I basically, it's not the borrower's fault in that sense. So I made them, we corrected everything, which, my current servicer, this poor woman with our current servicer was pulling her hair out. She was writing everything on the whiteboard, trying to figure out what was going on and on calls, which we got to figure it out. They readjusted everything to show all that interest, went over to principal, wiped the charges, got everything cleaned up. And now the question is, okay, for that much, do you go back after somebody? And, it would cost me more, to go after them. But sometimes I would still do that. But it's also somebody who I have a relationship with and potentially use in the future. So you also have to be careful of which battles you know how to pick. And over $2,800. And, my business size is, in 7 figures to 8 figures, whatever number is, $2,800 is not going to, the damage I do by doing something like that would be more than just swallowing my pride and letting it go.
Yeah. Well, in a sense, that's evaluating the risk
There you go.
from a business standpoint. No, just, and I know we're a little short on time here actually, but reason I asked about the mod, I just honestly haven't always favored doing a trial payment plan or forbearance. I mean, I get the point of it, but maybe whether this is good or bad, I don't know, but I've been quick to jump to a modification because it's if a borrower makes 3 or 4 payments or 6 payments, it doesn't really prove that much to me. So, and I understand a modification is final and it's, much more permanent than a forbearance or trial payment plan. But I just, for whatever reason, in the scenarios I've been in, I've just generally favored, look, here are 3 modification options or 2 options to the borrower, and pick one and let's modify this. And sometimes it's to clean up maturity date issues or other things. So it makes sense but yeah, I was just curious because it seems like, I know I'm rambling, but it seems like everybody just defaults to forbearance and trial payment plan before you do a mod. And I guess I didn't always see the logic in that.
I'll give you my logic, right, wrong, or indifferent, because I'm not always right. If you ask my wife, I'm never right. The forbearance, the way I look at them, and I will tell people, if you do something, try and get it in paper, because in today's times as well, if it does ever end up in legal, you can show proof that you've tried to work with them in the past. Whereas if you don't put anything in paper and say, oh, if you just make 5 payments,
Right.
Then we'll reset the loan. If that's, not in writing, that might be challenging. The forbearance is really a pause on any legal action to
Right.
see if the borrower can fulfill a short-term obligation, which could lead to a modification. It doesn't
Sure.
change it doesn't change the terms of the overall agreement.
Right.
The modification does. So if you do a mod, you're basically resetting that loan based on the mod that date. So if a borrower is 2 years behind and starts making payments in a forbearance and then fails, they're still 2 years behind. You can continue with your legal action.
Right.
If you do a mod and there was legal action, you have to cancel the legal action because of the mod, and then they're starting at day 0 again. So then you have to wait the 90, 120 days before you can start your legal and start that process over.
No, that is true. And this one in Michigan that we had to evict, her reinstatement amount was actually quite low. So there was a very high chance that she would reinstate and reset this entire thing. And that's because we did a modification. So there was probably a little more risk than I should have taken on. Just to your point, I mean, that's that gets to that issue. But yeah, it comes back to, it depends. I mean, if the borrower can put down $5,000 as a down payment for a mod, to me, that speaks just as much as, 6 payments or whatever. So it depends. All right. Well, yeah, I think we've provided a lot of content here. We're all a little all over the map, but I think people like these kinds of what just happened stories and crazy stories with our assets. Anything to add as we move toward wrapping up?
I'll just mention again for people who haven't listened to the prior episodes. At first, I thought today might be Jamie's last episode with us, but we will keep Jamie on for a few more little encore presentations. Jamie has launched his new podcast where you've got a half dozen episodes briefly out there.
From Adversity to Abundance, we've got 5 episodes out now, but I've got a bunch more recorded, so I'm excited about it.
So excited that the Good Deeds Note Investing podcast is not going anywhere. We are going to do a little bit rebranding. We're going to be changing the name because it's going to be called Creating Wealth Simplified. We will, of course, focus on notes, but we're also going to bring on other guests for other types of real estate, from multifamily syndications, talk with people using IRAs, infinite banking, really focus. It's going to be focused on real estate, but we want to broaden it a little bit more. We've been talking notes for 200 plus episodes. I think we brought on other people. Notes never gets old. And Lauren Wells will be joining me on that, as well as the co-host. So we're bringing back the female side of things, keep me in check and so forth. So alternating, go from Gail to Jamie. I just am curious why people just don't ever want to work with me. That's really my...
We are still working together. And Gail even said the other day in the Facebook group, I can't quit you guys. So, she's still following everything.
We did joke about that in the episode that just launched and so forth, of, people who joke. It's like, Jamie's got a fund, or they like breaking up and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, Jamie, I got a few 100,000 reasons why, we,
BiFi, Integrity Mortgage Note Fund. We've got, no, I mean, it's been awesome. And I like this. This is where we're going to find out who actually listens to our show. When they realize
listens to the end of the show. Yeah. That's the important
part. But like
part.
in 6 months, like, what happened? Why is Jamie no longer on? Well, you obviously don't listen. So why does it matter? It's just, we're both juggling a lot of different things. And I'm very grateful to have been a part of the show. And I'm, it's not what do they say? It's not goodbye. It's see you later. I don't know what the phrase is, but I'll be around. You know where to find me.
Yeah. So I was going to say something, but I won't. So cool. Well, any final thoughts? I think we did drop a lot of notes and bolts during this episode for people as well to learn from. But for those, thank you for listening to the end of our episode. Make sure to leave us a review on your favorite listening station. Now I'm going to have to come up with a new catch line instead of saying go out and do some good deeds. That's the one thing we haven't figured out because we have our intro and outro and everything. But what are we going to say at the end?
Yeah,
I think I can still keep that. By the way,
yeah,
I'm going to talk to Lauren and see if that can still hold on.
I recorded an episode for my podcast yesterday, and I said on there that, let's be honest, I almost said, "Welcome to the Good Deeds Note Investing Podcast." Yeah. Old habits die hard, I guess.
Yeah, so Lauren's definitely gonna have to do the intros to start because she's not brainwashed into the name from that perspective. So
yeah, it'll be good. I'm excited for the future for both of us.
And for both of us. Yeah, you've got your new fund launching June 1st, I believe.
Yep, June 1st, Integrity Income Fund. So, yep, I'm excited about that. Accredited investors, check it out, labradorlending.com. And go out and do some good deeds.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.